Hey friends, Ash here with Gents. Today I'm doing something a little bit different. Today I'm going to be doing what I'm calling my Mount Fragmore, which is going to be the 4 most important fragrances to me in what you might call my fragrance journey. So these 4 fragrances each kind of have stories associated with them, I guess, that helped me along my fragrance path. So I'm going to go over these 4 fragrances with you guys, let you know why they're important to me, and also tag a few other people so that they can do this as well, and maybe we can get some insight into what made these other YouTubers what they are, fragrance-wise. So let's go ahead and jump right into this. Some of these fragrances you will have heard about on my channel multiple times. Sorry about that, that's just the way it is. I've brought up some of these fragrances, how important they are to me, different stories associated with them. So if you've watched this channel a lot, you may already know some of the things that I'm going to tell you here. And I can already hear a couple of you out there, "We hate you, Ashton, your stories suck." Sorry about that, but I can't help it. For others of you out there, maybe this will help you learn a little bit about how I got here fragrance-wise, what drove me to collect them, to research them, to talk about them, stuff like that. So 4 fragrances, that's what we're going over. The first one that I'm going to talk about here, you guys have heard about before, right? Surely you have. It's this bad boy right here, Decant Noir by Guy Laroche. Decant Noir at this point is almost like a running joke or a running gag in TVs, movies, and sometimes the fragrance community. It's almost viewed like the bro fragrance of the 80s. So if you were out and about in the 80s and you were a total bro, you were probably wearing this. At least that's how it's put across. It is viewed almost like that quintessential oversprayed 80s fragrance where the guy came in the room and he had on so much fragrance that it overpowered everybody around him, destroyed everybody's olfactive sense. So I get that. I get that Decant Noir has that reputation at this point. And I'm gonna be honest with you guys, I love the way Decant Noir smells. I don't care about the reputation, I don't care that it definitely is going to be dated instantly as an 80s fragrance. It's not one that you smell nowadays and go, oh, that's very modern. It's not that kind of scent. And yet, I love it. I can't help it. It's got a ton of notes in it, which is something you would expect from fragrances in the 80s. It's got oak moss, lavender, fir, pine, leather. It's got a whole bunch of powerful notes in there. So, told this story a bunch, but I'll tell it again for you guys that are maybe newer to the channel. Decant Noir is a fragrance that I actually got first from my mom. And we did not have a ton of money or anything like that. There were 5 of us in the family, kids-wise. I'm the oldest. And so when I was in elementary school, she got me a small bottle, maybe 30 milliliters of Decant Noir, because I wanted a fragrance. And she told me at the time that Decant Noir was worn by one of the doctors at the hospital that she worked at, and that the people that worked at the hospital would follow the doctor around trying to catch whiffs of the scent trail he left behind while wearing Decant Noir. So when I was young, being told that and being gifted this bottle, which looked really cool to me when I was a kid, just black. You know, it's masculine, it's cool. It kind of maybe tricked me at that age into thinking this is it. This is the pinnacle of fragrances. If a doctor is wearing this, you know, somebody highly educated who's got a lot of money, and this is his choice, and it's making people follow him, literally follow him around trying to catch whiffs of it, then it must be the best. And so when I got my own bottle of it, I guess when I was a kid, it almost like validated me to an extent. When I put on Decant Noir, I was like, you know, I'm on equal footing here with people that are, again, I was very young, but people that are more successful than me, people that have it together, that have money, that have popularity, all this stuff. I was a kid, and at that point we were lower middle class, but when I wore Drakkar Noir, I felt like the man, even though I was actually just a skinny, nerdy, quiet kid with huge glasses. And so, ever since then, I've always had a soft spot for Drakkar Noir. It's kind of the first one that made me feel, I guess, better when I sprayed it on. Next up is a fragrance that I've talked about, again, a bunch. This one, the most popular fragrance of all time, men's-wise. And yeah, it's Acqua di Gio. Watery notes, a ton of citrus, white florals like jasmine and neroli, musk, some of the notes in this fragrance. This one is the fragrance that I guess you could call my signature scent when I was about 17, 18, 19. So around that time, I was working in the local mall. I actually worked at an arcade. I've talked about this on the channel a few times now. And a friend of mine said, hey man, do you have a bottle of Acqua di Gio? And I said, no, I don't have it. You know, tell me about it. And he said, Acqua di Gio is the #1 compliment pulling fragrance that you can get. Women love it. Anytime I wear it, I pull compliments from people. It's amazing. So I had to go and get myself a bottle. Now I had a little bit of a collection then, not massive, and I was wearing stuff like Axe body spray along with colognes and fragrances. I called them colognes back then. So Acqua di Gio is the first one that made me want to take the collecting a little bit further, I guess. It opened my eyes a little bit wider. And Acqua di Gio, to an extent, when I was 17, 18, you know, that age, it was like Drakkar Noir was back in the 80s, which is almost everybody had it. Everybody knew how it smelled. It did garner a huge amount of compliments. Comparable fragrances nowadays, probably like Dior Sauvage or Bleu de Chanel, Yves Saint Laurent Y, fragrances like that tons of guys have, and yet it works so well that nobody really feels bad owning it. You know, everybody smells the exact same, but everybody's happy doing that. That's how Acqua di Gio was. So I had this and I would wear it all the time. My friend would wear this all the time, and it did pull crazy compliments. It really did back then. Honestly, probably still pulls crazy compliments now, though it's a little more burned out nowadays as compared to back when I was younger. So Acqua di Gio makes my Mount Fragmore list of fragrances because that one really got me into the mode where I was wearing every day. You know, I was doing a daily wear of a different fragrance, and it kind of pushed me to learn more about fragrances. So anytime new stuff would come out, I'd go down and check it out at the local stores, at the mall. Again, I worked there, so it was pretty easy to do, and started to stay on top of things a little more instead of just having it be a purchase every now and again, you know, when it crept into my mind. So instead of just purchasing a fragrance here and there, wearing it most of the time, but not really all the time, to staying on top of things, purchasing more, starting to grow a small collection back then. Next up is a fragrance that I haven't really talked about too much on the channel, but this one would make my Mount Fragmore, and it is Ralph Lauren Polo Green. So there's a little bit of a story behind this one. I'm not gonna tell the story for sympathy points or anything like that, just to give you guys an idea of the reason this makes the list. So this one is a classic masculine style fragrance, still very popular, came out in the late 70s. It has a ton of notes, which you would expect. A lot of fragrances around that time frame did have just a huge note breakdown. It's got your masculine mainstays like pine, tobacco, fir, leather, oak moss, the stuff that you would expect from fragrances back then. Now, this fragrance is the one that I remember my dad by. Now, my dad passed away when I was in first grade. He actually committed suicide. And I can't tell you guys that I remember his voice, because I don't. A lot of times I don't remember how he looked. I have one picture of my dad, so it's hard to remember a lot of things about him. But one thing that I do remember is this. this fragrance right here. I can remember it sitting on his dresser. I can remember the way it smelled, and I can remember him a little bit through this fragrance. So in a weird way, when I was very young, 4, 5 years old, smelling this fragrance, put that memory into my head of my dad. And I don't have very much left from him, like I said. And this is something that reminds me of him. And in a way, this fragrance helped jumpstart everything. Having that memory, being able to smell this fragrance and having it remind me of a person, of a time, that was ingrained into my mind early on. And lots of people will talk about that with fragrances. They'll say, this fragrance reminds me of my ex. This fragrance reminds me of my brother or my sister, my friend, my mom, my dad, whatever. It has that ability, fragrance does. If somebody has a fragrance as a signature scent and you always associate it with that person, even if they're not there, then fragrances can be just very powerful things. And even after somebody is gone for decades in this circumstance, when you catch a little whiff of how they used to smell, it can remind you of the time that you spent together years and years and years ago. And that's what this one does for me. So with Polo Green kind of jump-starting maybe that fragrance journey, even if it was subconsciously years and years ago, it has to make my Mount Fragmore list. And some people will say that Polo Green today is not the same fragrance that it was in the past due to reformulations or things like that. And you could always go for this one, Modern Reserve, which is now discontinued, but a lot of people will tell you that Modern Reserve smells a little more similar to how Polo Green smelled originally. So now we're on my last one in Mount Fragmore, and this one is one I've talked about a whole bunch. It was on my most complimented list. It's been in spring lists. You guys probably already know what it is. Creed Green Irish Tweed. It has lemon verbena, violet leaf, iris, sandalwood, and ambergris. That's some of the notes in the fragrance. This one is just extremely green and fresh and classy and gentlemanly. Great fragrance again for springtime. One of my absolute favorite springtime fragrances. Basically, when I spray that on, just automatically makes me think of when everything is coming alive outside, when the trees are starting to bloom, the flowers are popping up, the grass is turning greener. That's what this fragrance is for me. Now, Green Irish Tweed is the first Creed fragrance that I ever purchased years and years ago. That is the one that I wanted the most. I had gotten samples of it, decants of it, I used them up, and I was like, man, I need to get a bottle. And so I did. And Green Irish Tweed, believe it or not, is the very first niche fragrance that I ever bought. I've said this in the past, actually lots of people have said this in the past, but Creed is almost like an entry-level niche brand, and I don't mean that in a bad way. It's really approachable. If all you've ever smelled is designer fragrances, and you're not ready for the more challenging niche and indie fragrances out there, Creed has you covered. They're gonna have fragrances that are higher quality than designers, and yet at the same time are extremely versatile. They're people-pleasing, compliment-getting, easy-to-wear fragrances. And I love Creed for that. There are some releases from Creed that I don't really like, but on the whole, what they do is something that I really gravitate toward. Being able to make fragrances more accessible to more people is something that I am kind of passionate about, you could say. Not everybody starts out saying, I want your funkiest oud, I want your most animalic leather, I want your most artistic fragrance that is not really wearable but tells a story. People don't start out there. People start out with what they like smelling, what smells pleasant to them. And then over time, if they choose to do so, they can start to gravitate toward maybe some more challenging things and see if they like that or not. Creed works like a stepping stone in that direction. Fragrances like Silver Mountain Water, still approachable, still versatile, still potentially compliment getting, high quality, and a little different than what you're going to smell in the designer realm, at least for the most part. And Creed Green Irish Tweed was my first step down that road, you could say. So it makes my Mount Fragmore top 4 list. So there we go, guys. My Mount Fragmore. Acqua di Gio, Drakkar Noir, Polo Green, Green Irish Tweed. Now I need to tag some people for this video that will hopefully do a video and keep it going. I'm trying to think of people that are still actively making videos so that they might actually do it. I'll say George at The Fragrance Apprentice, Manny at Cascade Scents, Chris at Fragmental, even though you've never really spoken. And since he came out with his new line, we'll tag Steven at Redolescence as well. So there we go, 4 different people, and they can tag whoever they want. Realistically, if you have a channel and I didn't tag you, you can still do the video. I won't tell anybody. All right, guys, thanks for hanging out with me today. Thanks for all your support. Hopefully this didn't bore you too much, and I'll see you guys again tomorrow with another fragrance video. See you guys.